What's up, everyone? Mike from What the Fun. This debate section is from our latest episode of Test Your Might, the weekly video game debate show. The full episode is found on any podcast app of choice with Apple and Spotify links down below. Thanks for watching. Enjoy.
We've all experienced Lies of P recently, there's Baldur's Gate. We've all been talking about this weekend as well. It's made me been thinking a lot about fancy tropes. And what I want to know is...
Wait, fancy tropes or fantasy tropes?
Fantasy, you're right. I should have enunciated. Fantasy tropes.
It sounded a little like fancy tropes.
I mean, look, if you have fantasy tropes...
He could just pitch his game again because Barbie's pretty fancy.
I have to change my answer real quick, guys.
It would be... All right, so I'm looking for the best use of a fantasy trope in a video game.
Yeah.
So you need to include, again, tell me the video game, tell me explicitly what trope you're working with, and if it hits multiple, feel free to expound upon it. But have a specific one in mind, probably, to make your pitch stronger. You won, what do you want?
I'll let Brian go first.
Yeah. So I had a couple options here, and it was a hard choice, but I think I'm going to go with a favorite of mine, which is from Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Okay.
Yeah, and so have either of you played that? Just curious.
The first mission.
Okay, that might actually be enough.
Okay, great.
So, are you okay with spoilers?
Absolutely.
Okay,
it's been decades.
Great. I was going to say, because I'm giving them literally can't knock. That's my point. So there's a character in that game named Kreia. She's like your archetypical old swamp witch energy character, right? She's very much going into she is the one who's training in the Force. She is your mentor. She is your not a Jedi but a Jedi master. And there's an archetype there, right? Of in fantasy is the wise master that teaches the hero, and then they die tragically and the hero has to go on without them. And this game completely makes you think it's going to do that, and then turns it on its head in a couple ways. One, Kreia is actually the main villain. You find out later she is Darth Treya, which is I actually just called her Treya there instead of Kreia because her other title. And she is playing and manipulating you this entire time until she literally backstabs you, essentially. And on top of that, part of that trope is always they have these wise words for you. And if you play the game, or if you play it through twice, one's dark side, one's light side, no matter what decision you make, she will always try and push you the other direction and guilt trip you, with later revelation that she's doing it just to undermine your self of sense, to make you doubt yourself, to make you weaker. And so I really enjoy the way they took this, especially in Star Wars, and that kind of epic fiction, pulling from Iliad, Odyssey, and all of that the figure of the wise matron, and just made it the most inverted, twisted, cruel version of it. That made her still, in my opinion, one of Star Wars' most interesting villains to me.
Okay.
Is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Okay.
Thank you for waiting.
Yeah. We're not unhinged this time, so I just had to wait. So back a couple years ago, I really did make, I think, a healthy decision for my gaming hobby, and that was to just pretty much solely focus on single-player games. And it started with one game in particular, and that was a very, very awesome indie game, super beloved. A lot of people in the indie game community love it. Death's Door. Now, Death's Door sort of opened my eyes to what indies could be, and so there was an indie game that will be my actual game that I'll be using for my pitch here. There was an indie game that I was just super excited about because it still had that same angled camera, the isometric feel, and it starred a little fox, and that's Tunic. Tunic is so good, and has a bunch of fantasy tropes, obviously, right? I mean, heavily inspired by Legend of Zelda, which certainly fantasy right there. There's tropes galore. I was almost going to go with Mario, because Mario saves the princess, and such a trope as well. So like Nintendo definitely has their they're in the weeds with those sort of tropes. But Tunic, it was my game of the year last year. Did it come out last year? I think last year. Yeah. Yeah.
What is time?
Yeah. What is time? But Tunic had this awesome mechanic, which sort of plays into the trope as well. But it was an unwritten manual, or rather incomplete manual that you had to complete, and you had to get all the pages around the overworld to not only figure out what you were supposed to do, but even simple things like controls. There was a created language in this game that the manual is written in, and the manual itself would only give you little snippets in English, and you had to put together the puzzle to figure out how to play the game. What's awesome about it is that you could do all these things from the jump, but you just didn't know how to. I remember learning that I could sprint like probably 10 hours into the game, and I could have done it at the beginning. But this little fox goes on an adventure that, again, a little bit of spoilers for Tunic, but goes on an adventure of who is the true heir of this like family of this world. And I believe it's mom, correct me if I'm wrong, I think your mom is like trapped in this sort of like spirit world, and you are trying to free the heir. Maybe it's not the mom, but it's just the heir, right? And your goal is to sort of free up, figure out why you're a part of this story. And so I think that I'm going to go with Tunic for this. I'll go into the tropes a little bit more in a bit.
Okay. Bold strategy. Rebuttal.
Yeah.
Go forward
I mean, my
with
first
more.
rebuttal is like your answer for best use of a fantasy trope in a game was just the whole game, and it felt a little unfocused for a fantasy trope. So immediately I'd like you to answer like pick a trope. Like if we're just saying best game that has tropes, like my answer would be different, right? It's not because like listen, if that's the case, I pull Inscription, right? Because there's a bajillion tropes in that. But like it's the specific use of the trope that I'm not hearing as much about as I would like, or even like frankly an identification of which trope you think is like the bomb out of those all, because you gave like 3 in your first answer. And so I pushed back.
Preamble.
Yeah, call it what you want. Still wasn't precise. And then yeah, on top of that, like I think if I'm just going to pick one of those, like the whole like, you know, rescuing a figure from the dead, right, kind of thing is like iconic, right? Goes back to Orpheus, goes back to like a lot of Greek mythology. But like I didn't hear anything there that was like doing anything new with it either. It seemed like a pretty bog standard one of those.
Let me unstandard it then. So I should have explained, I guess, a bit further, but I think the specific trope that I was going for was like the lost hero or the lost heir, because that is sort of the crux of this thing. But the biggest thing about it that goes into it, and that's why I think it does it so beautifully, is, and differently than other games or even other fantasy stories that has done, is that you have to figure that out for yourself. You don't have a situation where like you don't have a situation where like there are people like searching for you. You are searching for this heir yourself, and you are writing your own story by completing this book, completing this manual. In fact, again, spoilers, if you don't get all the pages, you don't get the true ending where you are able to save the current heir, and then so that you could become the heir. And so that's sort of like trope where nobody really knows that you are the true heir, that you're going to become the next heir of whatever it is. I think it's a little bit ambiguous of what you're becoming the heir of. In Tunic, at least, I think that's the point. You're supposed to like, write your own story, like, feel it out for yourself, I think. But the crux of just this lost hero, this heir that does need to step up to like sort of save the world from the I wouldn't say the underworld, but the enemies that you face. I think that's the specific trope that I was going for, because I think it does it so cool and so unique. Like it's you always have somebody that sort of helps you along the way, and like in just regular fantasy, like to make you figure out that you are the heir or that you are the lost hero. In this, you are putting the pieces together sort of yourself.
All right. I like limitations, so I'm gonna give you each again one more round. Give me 2 sentences, whatever you want to say about it. Whatever you want to say about your pitch, or if you want to make a last minute dig, if that's the last thing you want me to hear, that's fine. Go for it. Brian, we'll start with you.
Okay. 2 sentences. I'm just gonna. These are not my sentences. I'm just going to say I'm going to show self-control here, and I am not going to do the sentences I am capable of grammatically.
You could.
Because that is rude. I'm showing self-control here. I'm just saying it. That is very hard for me as a former academic.
And Sarah's putting the phone down.
Yeah. So what I'm going to say is created a new interesting take in an IP that has been around forever and had seemed to have already done everything. So that's sentence 1. Sentence 2 is going to be cool evil swamp witch.
Strong.
Wow. Okay.
No pressure. But that's second sentence.
Okay. I hear you.
One for the brain, one for
Oh man. Yeah. Tunic is a game where you don't know your fit in the story, but you are able to put the pieces together yourself. Not so cool swamp ghost things.
beautiful.
Brian, you already know which parts about your pitch I liked, at least. The parts I most appreciated.
Yeah.
Love Swamp Lady, love Swamp Witch, obviously. Star Wars has not a weird amount, but a good amount at least that I've encountered. Mike, you took a risk here in your preamble, bringing up 2 games that I've been like about even on this podcast. So I appreciate the risk taking. I do really like the idea that you didn't explicitly say this, but there is this idea with like the unknown heir, the person that's like coming up to be a hero and doesn't really know what's going on, like having to figure out what is going on in the world and their place in it. And like, yes, a lot of times they do have a mentor and sometimes they don't, but in video games you almost always do have a mentor. And just having the game be a place where you are the person that is lost in this world and trying to figure out where your place is in it, literally, is a pretty strong pitch. However, you kind of undersold yourself. You were a little scattershot.
I was.
And he has the Swamp Witch. So I don't know. So, no, but genuinely, I do like.
That's also a really compelling Sith.
I also am fond, a little more partial to the twist. And especially that sort of twist that's going on there, and especially the way they dig into it. I really like the point that like she's going to try to, no matter if you go, even if you turn evil or like go dark side, she's gonna be like, but like, you could be a little bit better, right? Like that's pretty neat, I think. So
it is my favorite part of that game was the realization that she is like my second week, like she just has no actual ideology she believes in. Like it is purely.
She's Shiva. I love it.
I feel like it's so hard to pull that off in a video game too, because there are a lot of video games that have those types of twists, but you can see it a mile away. Whereas I've never played that, but like you sold me on like just yeah.
All right, we are currently tied up going into question 3. This one's gonna be a way more wild one, I think.